Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 2020 Pro Chess League Day 2 of action. Grandmaster Robert Hess here with International Master David Pruis. David, technological issues aside, how pumped are you for this matchup between China and Russia?
I'm really pumped. These are two big names in modern chess. Russia obviously has been the name in chess for many years, but China has come up and challenged them for the Olympiad and for the crown of best country in the world. And I think it's awesome to see these two teams go head to head this first week.
Yeah, it's definitely a heavyweight matchup. Maybe not bringing all of their top guns to this matchup, but as the season goes on, for sure, these two teams will be teams to beat. Let me bring everybody up to speed with, we have all the teams in the league, 24 this year, and, difference in format because with fewer teams, we also eliminated the rating cap. So 24 teams will compete. Times are 10-minute plus a 2-second increment. And, of course, the final four will make their way to a live final.
Yeah. So 3 divisions instead of 4. The matches have also been spread out a little bit more, which means there's still just as much show for everybody to watch, just, a little less hectic with as many matches going on at the same time. And the slightly faster time control, like you say, I think could be one important factor this season. Slightly favoring teams with a few more blitz specialists versus rapid chess.
Absolutely, and I have the schedule up with the first match of the day, China versus Russia. We'll get those games started any second now, and later today we have Hungary versus Armenia. Croatia, the qualifiers, they upset some Goliaths in the qualification cycle. They'll take on the India Yogis. That India team is super strong. And the Turkey Knights, led by my friend Alexander Ipatov, will take on the Israel Counselors, led by Daniel Friedman.
Yeah, I could see India, to me, is another huge name in chess now. I could see them being one of the top 2 or 3 teams in this division, along with Russia and China, who we're going to see first. But I would love to see an upset from the Bulldogs. I mean, I picked against them in fantasy chess because it's just, I don't know, I have trouble believing an underdog like this, but I would love to be wrong, basically. Nothing could be more exciting to me than to see the team of IMs beat a team of GMs. And I think every other team has 4 GMs. Maybe I'm missing something in my memory, but I think every other team has like 0 IMs playing, and there's a team with 0 GMs and just 4 IMs. So if they could win a match, IMs around the world will be happy. Maybe you'll be worried, Robert, but
this is going to be a commentator battle if that's what happens. But you're absolutely right that without the rating cap, all these teams some teams have a 27-60 lineup. We saw St. Louis trot out pretty much the U.S. Olympiad team with the exception of Hikaru Nakamura. And, instead of him, they have the Vietnamese number 1, Lei. So really tough lineups throughout this league. Well, we have the games underway, David.
We do.
I don't even know which matchup to focus on because...
Start me with Dobrev.
Okay.
I know he's not 2,700, but...
Oh, but you like a potentially a sharp Sicilian line with an early H5 here for black.
Yeah. I also feel like Dobrev, despite not being 2,700, is a super important name for the formerly Moscow, now Russia Wizards. He's their manager. He was a rock for them last year in the season, right? Just super strong performance all year long. He was performing like just about 2,700 despite being rated 2,480. And then he also was working for them in the summer series, managing and playing at the same time. And his Chess.com blitz rating is around 2,850. So I think that Russia basically are not underdogs in this match because of Dobrev.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point because the ratings that you see next to the players' names is their classical chess rating. But as we've seen throughout the Pro Chess League history, some of these players really outperform those ratings. Of course, others underperform relative to their classical ratings. But somebody like Dobrev is super dangerous. And you wanted to come to this game both because of the player, but also the position is super interesting. One where black played a very early H5, which makes castling kingside more difficult. But also, you're thinking about, hey, can I get an attack going with a future pawn h4 push? Or am I just going to keep this pawn on h5? Because sometimes you play h4 too soon, g4 comes in. So David, let me ask you, how do you decide when to either push h4 or just how to halt and stay put on the h5 square?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say. First of all, no like simple answer to me. I think he halted because he decided he didn't want to let white play g4, g5. So once white played h3, he sort of changed his mind and said, well, if I play h4, white plays g4, then my knight's sort of destabilized by g4, g5, and I haven't opened the file for my rook. So he just kind of switched gears, and now he's just leaving that pawn sitting on h5. And I don't anticipate that he's going to play h4 anytime soon here.
Yeah, and also putting the pawn on h4 makes it's funny because it already seems like a vulnerable square if you end up trying to castle kingside, but on h4 it's even worse because once your pawn goes to h4, as David pointed out, g4 comes, and perhaps even an eventual bishop g5 to try to pick up this pawn on h4. So white has some flexibility that black does not, and as you see in Sicilians, typically if black can get in some kind of central break with for example, pawn d5, that's not happening here, right? There's a pawn on e4, a knight on c3, a bishop on g2. All of white's energy is actually focused on that square. So black will be a bit cramped for the time being, so you often see a knight e5 to c4 maneuver. But I just generally feel like white has a little bit more flexibility, especially with the inclusion of h5, because it makes black's kingside a little bit more difficult to hold on to.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned bishop g5 if black put the pawn on h4, but imagine black played bishop e7 and castled, and then white played bishop g5 there as well. That h5 pawn would be quite vulnerable. So I feel like Dobrev's going to have to reveal to us sort of what his flexible idea is for black, because normally when I've seen people play h5 for black in the Sicilian, they've just committed. They go like h5, h4, they don't castle, they try and checkmate you with the queen on b6 and a knight on g4, and he's playing knight e5, knight c4 like you suggested so far. But I wonder if he might do something unusual like not castling kingside.
Well, if he castles queenside, that's the funny part about the Sicilian. You've given up one of your queenside pawns, right? Your c pawn. So castling queenside still doesn't feel entirely safe, though perhaps in this particular position, white doesn't have the kind of ammunition to really ramp up the pressure on the queen side. But perhaps they'll keep the king in the center. It's not uncommon at all in Sicilians just stay put. White has just expanded with pawn to f4. So, I mean, David, generally speaking, as I admitted earlier, I like kind of the feel of the position for white. But the longer Sicilians go, right, that's kind of how the saying goes, the longer they go, the better black's opportunities are because of the very compact pawn structure that black keeps.
Yeah, so there goes queenside castling. I mean, every move, we're going to see how many different options Dobrev has for his king, between castling kingside, queenside, or staying in the center. So there goes 1 degree of flexibility there with rook c8.
Yep.
Yeah. And what you like white's position, what would you be looking to do as white from here? Like, he's played f4. Are you looking at f5 or e5 for white at some point soon?
The thing is, I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at e5 and f5, which is actually a distraction. I say that as like, it almost sounds confident, but actually it often hurts me when I'm playing my games because I think the position looks so good that I have all these options. Well, I was about to say knight d5 was something I was looking at, and now
that's what I was too.
He's played rook e1. He's making his intentions very clear. At some moment, he might just play knight to d5. For example, let's waste a move with rook to a8 back. Knight d5, pawn takes, pawn takes. You can't actually block on the e-file without losing material, and king d8 for now holds, so it's probably too soon to play a knight d5 sacrifice, but you always have to be very careful when black doesn't fully develop and white is trying to barrel down the e-file.
Yeah, and you can often play one of those knight d5 moves, even if there isn't a tactical follow-up, you just create a position where you've got long-term pressure.
Yeah, and I guess now e5 is also a threat, because with the rook on e1, it's very well-protected square, and if I get e5 in, my bishop on g2 has new life in the position, and the position starts opening up, and only one person's king in the center, and of course that's Dobrev's.
Yeah, so especially if the knight on f6 looks like it would have to go somewhere pretty awkward, like g8 or h7, that makes it definitely feel like an option for white. Bishop e7 means that if we played like an e5 push, the knight retreated, and then we tried playing knight d5, pawn takes d5, e6. Black's going to be a little bit better off with the bishop on e7 already slowing that file.
Right, that's very true, because now there's no opening of the file, at least not fully, and so that's a very important inclusion on bishop e7. So we'll see how Wen Yang continues this. We have other games in action. Should we?
Yeah, let's see Wei Yi's game, and I'm really curious to hear what you think of that position and that matchup. When I was sort of previewing these matches, I thought that Pavel Anisimov was potentially the weak link for the Wizards. Like, he's the one player in the Wizards who doesn't have a blitz rating over 2,800 on Chess.com. So, and then Wei Yi, of course, is the Pandas' biggest hope with a 2,900 plus blitz rating, 2,700 plus classical rating. So it's very important for the Pandas that he score big today if they want to win this match.
Yeah, and it's sort of tricky when you see a heavyweight on board one like Wei Yi, who's, as you said, he's in the 2,700s, and he is a favorite. He's the stronger players, but someone like Pavel Anisimov is a very strong player, grandmaster himself, and I think some of these ratings, as you were hinting at with Vladimir Dobrev, it's misleading to look at some of these Russian players and be like, oh wait, they're a 25-20 playing a 27-20. That's clear advantage to China, but these are some blitz specialists as well, and I would not take that for granted.
I feel like we should look at this move 19 capture by White for a second.
Okay.
So basically we have this sort of locked structure, and I thought that Pavel was doing fairly well against Wei Yi, which could have been a really bad sign for the Pandas. But he advances with e4, sort of a classic move in this pawn structure, but it is sort of a decisive moment when you choose to open things. And after d takes e4, he surprised me with knight takes c4.
Yeah, he didn't take back in the center, which is sort of what you
right.
anticipate with the pawn break. And he says, let's have an asymmetrical pawn structure, all these double pawns for black. So
right.
Queen c7, knight e3. So did it follow up after knight takes e4 the way you anticipated?
I mean, to me, when Wei Yi countered with e5, and then suddenly, he just had to trade on e5, it felt like his whole plan had backfired, because now basically the structural change he's made is he's given black a space advantage in the center. He's got a c3 pawn against an e4 pawn, where before it was White who seemingly had the nicer center. So I felt like the 19th move should definitely have been knight takes e4. What does the Grandmaster perspective say on that?
No, I'm with you, because you keep the position closed, the center doesn't break open, as you were just highlighting, and White can clamp down. So if you took with the knight on e4, and let's say we see a trade on e4, for argument's sake, then White can maybe play f4 and keep black at bay. There are some issues with the overextended b5 pawn, where rook d5 comes in very quickly to start pressurizing White's queenside, but as we see in the game, I mean, this just looks like black has a free run of things. After queen h5, rook d3 comes in, and if you take on d3, well, that's a passed pawn that you have to be very concerned about. But if you don't take on d3, I'm looking at rook takes e3 exchange sacks to play knight g4 next and come checkmate you down the h-file.
Yeah. I mean, that can happen after rook takes d3 also, is like part of the danger. Like if White played rook takes d3, e takes d3, then, which he's doing, then your natural move would be like rook d1 if you were playing bullet, worried about the passed pawn, but then rook takes e3 wins tactically because the rook on d1's hanging. But if you play some other move like queen b2 to cover the pawn or something, you still have to worry about rook takes e3 and knight g4 coming here.
Right.
So now we've got the passed pawn, which we need to defend tactically, and we've got this knight g4 idea, which we need to defend.
Yeah, and queen d4, it sort of does it all, but then queen e2 comes in, and the problem is, how are you stopping my passed pawn? As you just pointed out, David, rook d1 is always met by rook takes e3, removing the guard of the rook on the d1 square. So it looks like just black has a free hand, a totally free hand to use this d pawn. Wow.
Honestly, Hess, I've seen you calculate many times, and it's been quite impressive to me. After queen d4, rook takes e3, what does your internal computer chip say?
Actually, it looks pretty sweet. I mean, the knight g4. The problem is there's queen d8 check. So rook e3, pawn e3, knight g4. You have queen d8 check, king h7, queen h4. And
right.
I think for the time being, I'm not getting checkmate. I'm forcing trade of queens, but I know you're getting at the passed pawn now.
Right. So what I want to do there is trade queens and then put my knight on e3, controlling the queening square. Can you stop me?
Right. So I can go rook f2 to cut your pawn's progress off, and then the knight can come to c4, and it's like a very tough situation, but I think that white gets away with the rook takes f7, get the rook behind the pass pawn, and that should be enough. But it's getting really
That's
dicey.
right. The king's been pushed off of f7. Gotcha.
I mean, you just know, though, that he's sitting here calculating rook takes e3 because it does really tempt you, but I like Wei Yi's decision just to say...
He did the move you first wanted.
Yeah, queen e2 says everything is safe and sound. White still can't move. My knight might come to e4. I don't have to get... checkmate focus. I can just say knight e4 makes progress, threatens the pawns on f2 and even g3 with his knight on e3. It just can't stay put, and I think black is very happy here.
We've got a position that looks like a simple small advantage for Xu Xiangyu, the board 4 of the Pandas against Tomashevsky, the board 1, the only player over 2,700 today for the Wizards. So that is good news for the Pandas. And then we have a crazy game between Demidov and Bai Jinshi, where Demidov has sacked in exchange.
Yeah, let's go to that game because the game we have here will first touch upon a few elements of this position. Black has his pawn on e6 in the Xu Xiangyu game against Evgeny Tomashevsky, and so white is claiming that my knight on c3 is much better than your bishop on b7. A very typical French-style bishop that has no free space to work with, so long-range pieces don't actually work very well when there's something blockading their path.
Yeah, I mean, you can be 2,700, you could be 2,800. If you've got a bishop like that, you're getting outplayed, I think. I mean, I would be confident with white against Carlsen here. I mean, you're down a piece, man.
Yeah, you're playing just really without any real concrete plans either. This bishop on b7, it's terrible, but black is fighting for a draw. Tomashevsky is
queen e3, simple, please.
You might play f4, f5, and the thing is, even rookless endgames are still really good for white. I think you want to keep some of the tension on the board, so you don't want to just trade everything off. But even if that happens, because the knight can move into the dark squares, there it goes. I was about to say, this knight can go into the c5 square or the b4 square, just like... Bring this knight over to d3 and then into the action, hit e6, put pressure on the queen side. This rook on e3 can now swing over to the c file because your rook on e5 cements that pawn in its place. This is just beautiful so far for Xu Xiangyu, and I think that the Pandas will be very happy to see their board 4 potentially upset this board 1. And look at the clock situation as well, David.
Yeah, I mean, it reflects it. I mean, like, Tomashevsky knows he knows what he's in here. So we'll check back on that, but it should be a game where it takes several moves for white to grind it. So
let's get to the more tactical territory with the game between
f6 just played by Bai Jinshi. It looked like he sort of maybe won the exchange with this like combination where he traded pieces on e4 followed by playing bishop takes b2. It was sort of like a pawn sack into a forced win of the exchange. But now it looks like he's struggling to stop, to protect his king with a move like f6. It looks very risky for black.
It really does, because several moves come to mind instantly, right? Knight f4, bring another piece into the attack. Bishop takes g6 at some point will be on the docket. I wouldn't play it just yet because you don't have enough pieces in the attack, so you're just kind of giving black more material than he already has. If we just do a quick count, we take stock. Black has a rook for one bishop, this beautiful dark square bishop, and a pawn. And if this bishop could go to b2, game over, right? If we could get that bishop helping the queen on the diagonal. But the bishop on h6 is still a good piece.
So knight f4, he's probably looking at queen e5. That's why he's not playing it instantly, because otherwise knight f4 is kind of like obviously, right? I'm just going to put my knight on this square, and whoa.
I think one of the big issues, though, is tactically queen e5 fails, because after queen e5, knight e5, knight e6, you have to take rook e6, and I have either bishop takes b7 if I want to take more pawns, but bishop d5 kind of just ends the...
Right, so then why did he sack the bishop instead of playing knight f4? Knight f4, queen e5, you're absolutely correct about it failing.
Maybe queen f7 is what concerned him, but even there, like, you keep the... Queen f7 isn't scaring me, because I can just retreat my queen and still have pressure, but... Perhaps he sees something more direct, and queen e7 was the response.
But I didn't even see why black couldn't take the bishop. What? I mean, I must be missing something.
Yeah, I think was missing as well. But after h6, queen g6, king h8, you have some bishop g5, and just bring that bishop to f6.
Oh, yeah, just switch around. Jesus. I guess he had enough pieces to play bishop g6.
Yep.
Okay, queen e7, take it. Go to the endgame with the bishop pair and 2 pawns against the rook and bishop.
It almost feels like 3 pawns because it is 2 pawns, but one of the 2 for black is an extra pawn on the queen side. Whereas if white gets e4, f4, and those pawns rolling, black could be in a world of hurt. But I like this transition for black. I really think trading the queens makes black's defensive task much easier. Simply because you're not getting mated. The rooks now have many open lines, partially thanks to the fact you don't have too many pawns left. And you just take over the d file, and all of a sudden you can see this game turn. Rook d7 here, or rook d8. Oh, rook d8 blunders an exchange to bishop g5.
Yeah.
So rook d7, my initial instinct was correct, just to bring the rook to the d file. And honestly, I would be happy to play black's position now.
Yeah, it should be okay. I mean, with those weak dark squares, specifically right around his king, I think the unopposed dark square bishop, the weak dark squares around the king, that sort of factor makes like the queen trade super important for black, relieving that pressure. Even though white having all those pawns, their value increases in the endgame.
Right. The pawns are great, but checkmate's even better. And I want to take our attention, speaking of checkmate, to the Wei Yi game, because Wei Yi is about to deliver a mate on Pavel Anisimov. If the pawn on d2 didn't scare you enough, queen h2 mate on the horizon is enough to force resignation. Queen d3 check. He's like, if he doesn't see that his queen's under attack, I win the game. But queen takes d3 ends it. So let's go back just one move here.
Nice.
Because, he sacrificed. Let's go back a couple moves, I should say. And
that's a blitz trick, queen d3 check, right?
Yep. Too bad Wei Yi had 3 minutes on the clock. But queen came in, and he went d2. The queen had to come back. So it's all about this pawn trying to promote. Rook e4, kicking the queen off its very nice central square. Brought his king out, and then he just went g5. I mean, look at this kind of slow, methodical play. Like, what does g5 do? I guess it stops any sort of queen h4 checks. Look at that vision, right?
Yeah.
Without that pawn on g5, if that knight moves, there's going to be a queen h4, sort of a yo-yo drawing mechanism possible. So he plays g5, and after c5 says, now I can play knight to g4.
This is the move he wanted to play. If the pawn were on g6, it would be queen h4 check with a draw.
Exactly. And now
this knight g4 move is sweet. I mean, our viewers should take a second to ask themselves what Wei Yi would have done if Anisimov had taken the knight.
Yeah, I was actually about to ask the same question. I wasn't going to answer it yet, but why is knight g4 such a good move? We'll give you, 5 more seconds as we talk about how important it is to not allow this queen h4 check, and now we'll answer it. So, David, why don't you do the honors? What happens if knight takes g4?
It's queen takes f1, king takes f1, and then rook to e1.
That's really nice because I think at first glance people would think that knight g4 is just distract the knight away from the promoting square, which is one of the benefits of that move knight to g4. But if you could deliver a checkmate, you're going to do so. So knight g4, play queen to d5, and after the exchange sacrifice on e3, the king had to go at the corner. After queen takes g3, you can't stop queen h2 mate, which is why he went for one last trick with queen d3 and said, move your king away. Nope. Queen takes d3.
Other result, it did not take that long for Xu Xiangyu to convert against their board 1 Tomashevsky.
Wow.
He just won this endgame like super fast. I guess that's speed chess for you.
Yeah, wow, he really did win this game fast. We'll come back to it because there's probably a lot to dissect there. I'm following too many players, some of whom are playing later today. But let's go to the game between Wen Yang.
Looks like Dobrev is delivering as well right now.
That's exactly where I wanted to go because Dobrev here with the black pieces is just up in exchange. He's got his rooks in the second rank. So I liked White's position early, but Dobrev said, well, I don't care what Robert Hess thinks. I'm going to go ahead and take this one.
I'm going to have to review this game because out of the opening, it wasn't clear what Black's plan was going to be.
No.
And now his plan is going to be to move the rook on f2, and boom.
Up a clean piece. Let's go to the other game because, this one is resignation. We'll come back to it to analyze, and we have the game between Demidov.
2-1 for China so far, and we still have the exchange for 2 pawns, but we don't have the bishop pair anymore. Feels maybe a little bit drawish here with the opposite colored bishop, dare I say.
Oof. I mean, it's so hard to assess a position like this because of quantity of pawns that white has. But opposite colored bishops definitely is...
Okay, king f7.
Yep, okay. That pawn is not getting far enough. I guess
he's got this idea of rook c3 check, right? And so...
Whoa, he made that...
Cutting it close, Robert. Cutting it close.
Yeah, what was that about? He really went down to 1 second left and 2 straight moves, and he might just lose on time if he's not careful. But
yeah, so here he just wants to trade his rook for the knight and play bishop takes f3, right?
I thought he was going to do that, but maybe he's saying the king can't go to e5, so I can just repeat moves.
He's saying my rook is actually strong enough right now. You can't really make progress.
But the rook takes d3. It's a very tough decision to make, and well, okay, now it doesn't matter because he's
already got the pawn.
He's already got the pawn, but in general, when you have 2 pawns like this, like white does over here, and
this knight is trying to get to c7. Yep. Don't let it. Knight. Okay, he cut off e6 and h5 with his bishop. That was a good square for the bishop. Whew.
All right, well, how do we get that knight in? Because the knight is actually totally...
King takes e7. He got rid of the one that was going to beat him.
Oh, man.
Uh-oh, white's in trouble now. It just flipped around.
Black actually has some chances here. If that rook can go gobble up the kingside pawns, the h and g pawns over here, that h7 pawn might become a runner. So now...
Yeah, this knight is, like, useless now.
It's trapped. It's trapped. It's lost. If you go knight g2, this bishop f3, it has to go to e1. You have to bring this knight to e1. There it goes. But you lose h4 in the process.
Oh, but does he want to give up the c pawn? I guess so. I guess he's got enough with just the h pawn to try and win this game.
Oh my gosh, this is
getting... Oh no, the guy defended it. It's like, what? I didn't get what I wanted. Now he's maybe doubting that pawn trade there if he wanted to win this. There's knight f4 coming here on rook d4. We'll keep him in the game.
Yep, but king f5 then comes. It's like, it feels like black's just inching forward.
Right, he's afraid that knight would be trapped on h3, so he doesn't go for that piece trade.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, it's more confusing for black, actually, if white keeps both minor pieces on the board. That makes sense.
Right. So he's giving him some checks. I think he's just gaining time. That's the
now we get to see who's got the 2800 blitz rating, right? When it's down to this increment situation.
Yeah, and that's really what it's all about speed at this point, because I think the position... Objectively, it feels like black is better, but white should be holding.
That's my feeling too.
Wait, why?
Looks like they're repeating it. Wow, so logical.
That is a decision that I would not have made. I honestly would have been pushing this with black for a while. And well, they agreed on a draw here. I mean, black is risking nothing by playing on. The one thing though is China is up 2-1 at this point, right? So, you just kind of take your win, say 2.5, 1.5 lead after the first 4 games. That's great. How could I have expected Xu Shangyu to beat Tomashevsky? A great player, Xu Shangyu is, but Tomashevsky is, that's Tomas, right? That guy is a former 2760 player, but the China Pandas, they don't even have their all-star lineup in today, and yet they're still wreaking havoc on a very strong Russian team.
Yeah, I mean, the key for them is the win from Xu Shangyu. I mean, that's sort of like... That's a huge result for them. Huge confidence boost for Xu, and we'll see. Tomashevsky, as far as I know, this is his Pro Chess League debut, right?
I believe so. Yes.
And not every 2700 has always had a smooth debut. I mean, the Pro Chess League was already tough with the rating cap. You would have 2700s come in and have shaky first weeks. I'm thinking of Pavel Anisimov last year, for example. It was never easy to suddenly come in, play. Some players don't play a lot of blitz online, so come into this new format, new time control. 10-2, but now it's even more brutal because Xu Shangyu is like board 4 instead of board 2. So it's just going to be like tough all day if Tomashevsky can't get feeling comfortable in his chair.
Yep, and David, you're absolutely correct, and we are going to take a quick break here, and when we get back, we'll see if a player like Xu Shangyu can keep up the momentum for the China Pandas. So everybody, stay exactly where you are. We will be right back. And we are back with our coverage of the 2020 Pro Chess League season. And let's start off, David, by talking about Evgeny Tomashevsky. His FIDE rating is still above 2,700. His rapid rating is nearly 2,700. He's now 32 years old, still in that upper echelon of chess players. His accomplishments, there are many of them. But what do you make of his entrance into the Pro Chess League this season?
Well, I think it's kind of like, potentially a huge asset for the Wizards, who, despite being the Russian team, have typically operated without 2,700 plus players. I mean, I would say Russia's famous for having 2,700 plus players, but it's kind of new for the Wizards to have these 2,700 plus stars. And I know they've got one or two others on the team this year. So I think they're going to be looking to see which of these guys turns out to also be a PCL beast, right? Between Vityugov, Andreikin, and Tomashevsky, they've got 3 2,700s to try out, find out who's most comfortable in this format. And he's got to probably turn it around today, within these 4 rounds, if he wants to, really lead this team.
Yeah, he does, and we have games underway. We have liftoff here, and Tomashevsky now has the white pieces, so he's playing another very strong Chinese grandmaster in Wen Yang. And well, David, when you lose your first game in a match where you're supposed to be the one lifting up the Russian team, does that kind of make you dejected at all, or do you think Tomashevsky's so experienced, he's used to, he has an upset loss every now and then, and he can just kind of sweep it under the rug and move on?
I think it depends on the personality of the player, Robert. So there are probably some people who could get quite dejected from a single round loss, and you'll see them not play well the rest of the match. And that's brutal in the PCL, because it's one thing to lose one game, but if you got to play 4 games and you don't play your best after that, that's really rough, and your team's not really going to want you in future weeks if you tank after one loss. A lot of guys like Tomashevsky, they've got so much experience, they've been through so many ups and downs that they can weather a couple more, and it's no big deal. But I'm actually thinking of Hikaru Nakamura as somebody who actually I think doesn't take losses that well in the PCL. Somebody who is so good but expects himself to go 4-0 or put so much pressure on himself. So that kind of personality, they lose one game, and I see him get so upset, and I think it affects his play. I once saw him sort of play the rest of his games on blindfold. He turned off the pieces, Robert. He was just so mad.
And I think part of that, though, is because the teams that he's been on, right? Where, and it's no offense, of course, meant to his teammates, but some of the teams are underrated relative to the strength of the St. Louis Archbishops, especially now without the rating cap. So we just saw the New York Marshals go down to the Archbishops, but Hikaru played fabulous chess.
He played fabulously, but he was putting so much pressure on himself to win every single game. I feel like with less pressure on himself, he could have scored 3.5 with the way he was playing that day. Maybe even 4 if it were just a relaxed 4 instead of I got to do it. I'm playing the Archbishops. I've got to carry. So, I'm sort of waiting to see which way Tomashevsky's going to lean on that. If he's just going to take it one game at a time, or if he's going to show some tilt here.
Yeah, and he's known as the professor in many circles because of his technical style. And so let's have him teach us something in this position.
I thought it was just for his glasses.
Well, not all of us who wear glasses are, professorial. But Tomashevsky definitely is. And right now with the white pieces, he has a big spatial advantage. Look at his pawns over here on the king side. F4, G4. His pawn on D4, of course, is a good one. But potentially there might be the drawback of when you have pushed pawns, as you have with the D and F pawns, the E3 pawn, the one in the file between those two, can become a bit of a weakness. However, it's very easy to protect it for the time being with a simple rook E1. And, Tomashevsky starts with queen H2, I guess suggesting that king on C8 wanted to go to B8 and now can't do so easily with the queen eyeing that diagonal. Queen H2, I don't really fully understand the grasp of, that one.
Yeah, me neither just yet. It's going to take a while for that move to percolate into our minds. But I think it's very important what Wen Yang did on move 14 when he put the pawn on f6, because he said there's no knight on e5, there's no outpost there. That means there's going to be, it's going to be harder for white to hide the pawn on e3 when he starts to pressure it on the e file. I would be looking at knight e8 to d6 for Wen Yang here before putting rooks on the e file, because otherwise that knight on g7 is looking terrible to me.
Right.
But I actually think that that Wen Yang's position makes a lot of sense. Maybe Tomashevsky wants to play a move like f5 in response to knight e8, and that's part of the reason for the queen on h2.
Yeah, I mean, knight e8 played, so you're really on point here with black strategy. And f5, I do think, is the logical reply, because why else is your queen on h2? It doesn't actually help you really at all unless you are trying to open up the position, because the queen just one move ago was over here on the c2 square and was perfectly safe on that square. It didn't need to move. It still was actually helping your f5 push. Instead, playing queen h2 says, maybe I'm waiting for the right moment to play f5, but when is the right moment? I don't see how the f5 is any more potent now the queen is on h2 rather than on c2. So a very odd decision, at least one that is hard for me to comprehend. I still think white's position is completely fine, but it's one or two slow moves, like a queen h2, that turn a slight edge into a position with no advantage whatsoever.
Another thing to maybe worry about a little bit is Tomashevsky's clock. I mean, I know he's not like running out of time or anything, but he's white, and he's down, basically 2.5 minutes on the clock here. Black's got 9 minutes, which to me, these are just signs that Black is super comfortable with what he's doing, and that Tomashevsky's worrying a little bit, right? Because if you get a setup that you just know and you like as white, this is not a tactical position yet. So if he has a comfortable position that he's had many times, one of the advantages of a 2700 is that class that they have, right? Where they're they've seen it all before. They sort of vaguely know almost everything about chess, right? In terms of just what strategies there are, what typical maneuvers. So normally, they could play very fast if they're comfortable with their position until they get to a tactical moment.
It's totally true. But on the flip side, with all that experience also comes, hey, with the white pieces against someone 100 points lower rated than I am, I should be getting an advantage. So you start becoming a perfectionist. You look at every single line. Will that line possibly give me an edge? Oh, wait, no, the position actually doesn't have much in it. Well, then I have to take a step back and find an exact strategy. And when it comes to rapid and especially blitz chess, a good fast move is often better than a great slow move. Because if you don't have time remaining after that, unless you're winning on the spot, if you're just slightly better, then it's just going to be hard to keep that up when you have no time left. Right now, going to 5 minutes, this is not a good start here for Tomashevsky.
No, I mean, look, I was starting to think about the time as an issue 2 minutes ago, right? When he had a 2-minute disadvantage, I already thought that's not really a sign that he's got what he wants. And now he's down 4 minutes. Okay, he's going to fight for that dark square on e5. He's
given him his knight access here, and the essential question is that actually valuable? Look at how quickly Wen Yang is playing.
He's so confident. He has not at all the feeling of a sub 2700 taking on a top 30 player for maybe one of the first times in a major competition. He's just smooth as can be. He's going to lodge a knight on c4.
Yep.
And
honestly, Black's pawn structure is better as well, because when we talk about pawn structure, we look at the number of pawn islands. What's a pawn island? Well, pawns that are on adjacent files. And right now, White has 3 pawn islands. The A and B pawns is one, the D through F pawns is another, and the H pawn is isolated. And right now, we have just 2 for Black, so a more compact pawn structure. A pawn's best friend is another pawn. And as David was rightly pointing out, the C4 square is Black's for the taking. You can even slow play the position. You don't actually have to take on D3 anytime soon, because if if White ever captures on f5, I simply take back with my queen. So king b8, just putting the king away from any of the center and allowing rook c8 and potentially pawn c5 as well.
Yeah. Okay, b3 at least keeping the knights at bay for the moment. But overall, very, very promising start for Wen Yang. One thing, wow, he's still playing so fast. One thing to mention about Wen Yang for people who don't know him, is that his Chess.com blitz rating is like 2850. So this guy is like super dangerous. He lost in the first round to Dobrev, but this guy is definitely showing, you know, confidence and skill so far. Let's talk for a second about Dobrev and like having to both play and manage. Okay. Dobrev, I noticed like oddly that he was listed as board 2 for Russia, even though by rating he would be board 4.
Okay.
And you know, and I double checked. I had the suspicion, and he had to switch his lineup. Okay.
Yep.
So, in fact, they had to make 2 substitutions, Robert, for today. So, Dobrev is, you know, he's playing, he's managing, he's scrambling, and I think he's actually having to do a ton of work off of the board as well, on the board, to both put the team together and then, you know, maybe carry the team during the match.
It's a lot of pressure, honestly. I mean,
do you think that could be kind of tough for him? I mean, he showed up in the first round, so like you might not guess it, but from my experience being a manager, when you have to scramble or do like a replacement or something, that would like drives me crazy.
Well, I'm actually going to pull up his game. It's a nice segue to that game. But it's definitely frustrating as a manager. I don't know from personal experience, but I can only imagine that, you know, you have a lineup set, you think you're ready to go, then 2 people can't play, and so you have to find 2 replacements within your own team, and you know, it just kind of creates a difficult environment. However, I think for somebody like Dobrev, who loves chess, he was in the Speed Chess Championship main bracket. He qualified for that by taking out the qualifier, and he lost to Hikaru Nakamura in the first round. But you know, he loves chess. He's a great speed chess player, and I think he takes a lot of pride in his team. So on one hand, it really is unfortunate. It takes a lot of energy out of you to spend all this time just gathering players to play when you have to then go ahead and play players like Wei Yi or Xu Shangyu and all these really talented Chinese stars. But on the other, I do think maybe it helps build some team chemistry as well, because you know, he's clearly very dedicated to the squad.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if he just has like a lot more energy than me or normal people.
He definitely seems to have a lot of energy. That's for sure.
Because I don't see him suffering from it, but like I can imagine if somehow I were strong enough to play in this league, that the managing and playing together would be tough for me. And this guy seems to do like all of it. I mean, he streams, he plays other events, as you said, and he's gonna have to put a rook on e1 soon, defend that e pawn. That's gonna be some extra work.
He's used to the extra work, though, right? You know, it might be extra work for his rook, but he's used to it at this point.
But you compare it with like China, the Pandas, or like St. Louis, another team. You know, 2 teams that are always in the Final Four, right? Yep. And one of them he's up against today. And those teams have a separate manager from the players, right? So there's like this division of labor where the players can really just focus on playing their games.
Yeah, and I was going to mention Armenia as well in those listed teams, especially now with no rating cap. Artak Manukyan, their very dedicated manager, he doesn't have to worry about preparing and playing the games. Now he can just focus on equipping his players with everything they need, making sure that they're, you know, properly prepared. And a team like Armenia is, I think, a good time to bring them up. They're especially dangerous because they have the most balanced team, I think, with 4 players this week's lineup with a classical rating between 2601 and 2611. All 4 of them. I mean, that's crazy. But they also have 2 of their players in the top 20 blitz players in the Chess.com server. So clearly, you know, some of these youngsters like Haik Martirosyan and Shan Sargsyan, very young, very talented, and they have this dedicated manager who can just spend all of his energy helping the players rather than being in 20 different directions at the same time.
Right. And they still have that intense sort of like team spirit and everything that you were saying that, you know, Dobrev might be like building for his team. They still have that feeling, but it's not like Shant has to like organize things while playing, you know, or Zavin has to like, you know, like call like 10 people to find his 4th player on Saturday or something.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And
but so far I'm just super impressed with Dobrev, because like I would think that it's actually a major disadvantage, honestly, to be sort of like have so much responsibility on his shoulders
Mm-hmm.
And so far, I've never seen him suffer from it.
Well, I was about to say, if it is, some burn from it, doesn't look like it based on the way he's playing. He won a first-round matchup on the black side of Sicilian, and now, oh my gosh, I was actually just thinking, is it possible to take on this pawn e3? Because that knight is sort of under a permanent pin here along the e-file, and, well, white can consider taking on d5 because there are pins everywhere, but I almost feel like there's some queen d4 check, knight c3, and your knight might not survive too long.
Right. So like queen d4, black might throw in queen f6 there.
But then I
because
take
if you
on f6, and but you're going to play d4 on me.
Yeah, because I'm trying to get control of the d4 square with queen f6, and if you avoid the trade, I play d4. So
right, and I guess I can take on d5, and we're liquidating, but whether it's still about this pin here on the e-file. I guess bishop d7 covers that for the moment, but then I move like knight c5. I like white's position. I mean, a lot of these transitions here, I think that black is sort of, if you're able to survive, it's by like a thread, because I do think that with this pin along. Wait, is king f2 coming next and he can't protect his knight? Did he just play h3 as like...
He's trying to win it with his king. For a second, I was like, h3, that doesn't look that aggressive. And then, no, it's because he wants to rush the knight with his king. Okay. Wait, that's intense.
How do you protect that thing?
I mean, can I play a move like, this may sound insane, but like king f8 or something, defending my queen because I want to play knight c4?
But the problem is that they're king f8, king f2. You play knight c4, I just take your knight on c4 because now my king and my queen...
Because now e1's defended, so I don't have my tactic, yeah.
Wow. Look at this guy. He just plays h3. We're all looking at your queen d4 check, knight c3, some kind of move to immediately take advantage of it, and that... we all know that this pin is the focus of the position, but being able to put everything together and be precise and just play this very calm move h3, because one move ago if we played king f2, knight g4 comes with a check, and now white is very unhappy. But he plays h3 so that when he gets one more move going, king f2, if I get a free move, your knight can't come to g4 with check, your knight is pinned, and there'll be a third piece attacking it, and we'll pick up that knight on e3. So
wow,
g5 played here.
By the way, just a sense of where the match is right now, real quick for everybody. It looks to me like Wei Yi is kind of cruising, and the other two games are toss-ups for now.
I brought the board up between Wei Yi and Demidov really quickly just to show what David's talking about here. There are these beautiful knights for white on f7 and d6. This bishop on g7 is a terrible piece, and white is already up a couple pawns. And even if you lose the c2 pawn, you still have one extra pawn, and that's a big pawn on g7. So good position for Wei Yi. Let's go back to I'm just going to go around the horn a little bit. Tomashevsky with the white pieces has his knight on e5, trying to get some attack going on the queen side, but it feels... is there actually an attack? Like, how do you go and try to mate this black king with his rook on a5? You're trying to go queen a4, a3 or something, but I don't know. It feels like wishful thinking.
Yeah, I mean it. But on the plus side, I mean he's definitely not worse here, right? I mean he got the knight on e5 that he wanted all game. He's kept his own king covered. His rook's reasonably active. Maybe the rook on a4, a5 is a little bit like stuck and committed, so he needs to like avoid queen trades. If black played a move like queen f8 and he had to trade queens or something, the rook on a5 might be bad in an endgame. So maybe that's like one important thing to stay careful about.
The rook on f6 is really a great piece because it protects the c6 square. I'm thinking g5 for black at some time soon to open up the f-file for this rook, because trading pieces really does help black, as if white doesn't have some sort of sacrifices and mating attack, then black just has a better structure. And look at this move, pawn to b4. I mean, that just feels... Can I just bring my knight to d6 at some point?
Whoa, he's like so committed now, huh?
He's trying to break it all open with a b5, but now king to b8. Can I just retreat my king and avoid any of these pins? I wanted to play knight d... Wait, but isn't c6 hanging? I wanted to play knight d6 initially, but I was worried about the c6 square. Like knight c6 check, right?
Knight c6 check. Huh.
What was that?
I mean, he played what you wanted him to play.
But I didn't want him to do it with the pawn c6 hanging. I wanted him to like play some king b8 move for... What?
I don't understand. And Tomashevsky didn't do it, and they each had 2 or 3 minutes.
Wait, what are we missing after knight takes c6 check?
Knight takes c6.
Because if you take with the pawn, rook a6 check just goes and... Is there no mate? Is that the point?
But... But it still feels like you're gonna lose.
Yeah, it's like
I guess you have to. If you take with the rook, then after the rook trade, you definitely lose your queen.
Right.
So you would have had to take with his b pawn and leave the other piece on the board. Then rook c6 check, king there.
Yeah, king b8, and then just like hope that your king escapes.
Then rook a8 check. If the king tries to escape through c7, then there's queen c6 mate.
Oh, well then that means just what are we missing? What was wrong with making?
I don't know.
What was that?
I'm blindfolded on the analysis, so I can't really imagine it.
I just felt like a very obvious tactic, and we might just be missing something.
Yeah.
But
I'm told, by the way, that Dobrev is indeed streaming as well as playing this game right now. Did you see the G5 thing that happened in that game?
So I'll bring it up. G5 was played, and he went queen c3, took on G5, and still went king f2. Oh my gosh, the pin.
Yes, still went king f2, right? I mean, and Xu Xiangyu is like desperate to stay in this game with that knight like getting encircled by Dobrev's king.
Yeah, it's just like the knight can't move. The rook on e8 is hanging with check, so you can't just make a knight discovery. Pawn to d4 is an idea that we were discussing earlier, where black would like to play this move to protect the knight, but the queen can just scoop that pawn off the board.
Yeah. Real quick, Demidov resigned after getting his bishop on g7 trapped the bad piece at the same time as his king got trapped on the side rank. So he was just getting like side rank mated.
Nice.
So that was an expected result, but Wei Yi looking super sharp so far today.
Yep.
And I mean, sharper than Tomashevsky so far. They've got comparable ratings. They're each trying to lead these teams. But I'll let you get back to calling this Xu Xiangyu versus Dobrev game.
Yeah, no, I think you make a great point, though, about Wei Yi. You know, if he's on form like this and Tomashevsky is not, that was supposed to be the heavyweight matchup between these two teams, kind of the slugfest at the end of the day. But it does feel like Wei Yi is in the better shape of the two at the moment. But Xu Xiangyu, very good first game. He beat Tomashevsky, but it's what we were saying about Dobrev. He may be one of the lower-rated players for the team by classical FIDE rating, but by speed chess standards, he might honestly be the best. So right now, he's picking up this
10 seconds left. All right, I looked at this d4 move with the idea of queen c2, but I thought white could even play king g1 in response.
I think king g1 is the best move because rook e2 runs into knight d1 check.
Right.
Oh, but there's queen takes d1. Because queen d1, rook e8 check, and you pick up the queen at the end.
Oh. Oof. So this is even better than the other. And he's seen it too. Dobrev is just like,
Dobrev is a beast. I mean, the guy is...
That is so sick. That is so sick.
That is... He's just up a piece now. So Xu Xiangyu will try, but let's get an instant replay on that. Queen c2 check... Thinking you're protecting the d1 square, but the bishop on f3 still exists. And once that rook moves out of the way, if queen takes d1, rook e8 check would have been game over. So instead, he said, okay.
Oh, and he's got queen g4 at the end here, too. He's lined that up. Just going to go straight into this end game. It's over.
Yeah, and the reason why this is winning is because there's a g-pawn on the board. If it was only the h-pawn, this is a resignation. Well, actually, then he would take with the pawn on g4, probably. But the point is that with an h-pawn, the light square bishop, the wrong color corner in h8 without the g-pawn, this wouldn't be so ideal. But however, he has a g-pawn, so he can just get his bishop to stop the a-pawn and win the game. That was awesome.
That is sick. And guess what, Robert? I've got Dobrev on my fantasy team today.
Do you?
Yeah.
Smart guy. I didn't do a fantasy lineup, but I should have. And Dobrev is a great pick.
All right, so there's only one game left here. Yevgeny Tomashevsky.
Yep.
And Wen Yang has opened up the center, and Tomashevsky's about to open up what he's been trying to, the black king. But I feel like it should be good for black. That's just like I haven't calculated anything yet, right, Robert? I just like switch screens, and my instinct says black.
So black is now up 2 pawns. The white king on b2 it looks more open than the black king on a7.
Maybe my instinct counted pawns, but I didn't do it consciously. You know, I wasn't trying to cheat or anything.
No, I mean, watch out for queen c4 check. Oh, the queen's on e8. I was like, oh my god, the rook's hanging on e3. So I was just like...
Almost made me spill my milk.
I freaked myself out. Oh my gosh. But queen b6 here, coming after the a-pawn, looks pretty good because the queen... Oh, but this queen a3 check. He forced the queens off, so...
Forced the queens off. Now, what does he want to do? Play...
Rook d6 and just... settle. Yeah, unfortunately, you know, if you lose the c6 pawn, all these endgames...
It's a draw, right?
Yeah, rook d7, take h7 here, and okay, rook h6, same idea. Go after that h-pawn.
He's scrounged a draw. I think I'm very confident Tomashevsky knowing his rook endgames.
Yes.
Not concerned that he'll fuff it up just because he's got 10 seconds on the clock.
Nah, I have no concerns about that whatsoever. The h7 pawn under attack. It'll be rook and 2 versus rook and 2, and it should be...
He'll play king c4 now, right?
Yep. Bring that king to d3, blockade the pawn, and there's no progress to be made because black will just shuffle around, but the rook is tied down to the d pawn and to the h pawn at the same time, and that's not good news. So,
hang on, is he going to try and win this, Robert?
Aha, look at that. Rook h5. Is who going to try? Tomashevsky?
Is Tomashevsky going to try and win it?
I think we have our answer as soon as he lets this one peter out.
I mean, I just saw him play like a5, h4 when he could just sit, right? And I was like, is he going to try and do something? Is there some weird thing he knows where rook and 2 wins?
Well, Magnus did that against Boris Shevchenko, actually. It was rook and 2 versus rook and 3 in the World Rapid or the Blitz? I don't remember which one at this point. I think it might have been the Rapid. And he won an endgame down a pawn by putting his pawn to h6 and then getting his rook in the 7th rank. But okay.
Yeah.
This one was a draw. These 4 games were split 2-2. Dobrev is a monster. Unfortunately for him right now, his teammates are in kind of holding their share of the bargain because they're down 4.5, 3.5. But we will take a very quick break now. When we come back, we'll have the second half of this match. We're halfway done, but still a lot of life left. Just a 1 point difference.
1 point lead overall, right?
Just a 1 point lead. So when we get back, we will tune in and make sure that, hey, do the Pandas have this? Will the Wizards come back? I don't know. It's up to the players. But we'll be right back so everybody stay exactly where you are. And we are back, and we should start off with a graphic of a superstar, that is Grandmaster Wei Yi, just 20 years old, the Junior Speed Chess Championship winner in the year 2019. David, how impressed have you been with his play thus far in the opening 2 rounds?
Super impressed. He's obviously a great player, but I don't ever take it for granted that somebody's going to come in and just win game after game after game in the PCL, no matter how good you are, right? So it's not like I don't think he's a great player, but it's just the level of competition is tough. You're playing 4 games. I just don't expect people to come in and go 4-0. I expect a good player to come in and score 3 points out of 4 if they're like really, really good. And that's a 2,700 performance rating easily in the league. This year, that might even be like a 2,750 performance to get 3 points. So not only that, I would say his 2 wins so far have been pristine, like untouchable, like, where it feels like the opponent never even like could think about drawing the game.
Yeah,
They're just like, oh, I'm getting killed.
That first game with the eventual exchange sack on the E3 square, and very importantly, that G5 move, he has been very pinpoint precise, I would say, thus far. And we're going to see the games get underway any moment now. I'm super excited, and I know you are, David. We talked about this during the break, between them, because the matchup of Wei Yi and Vladimir Dobrev, both players at a 2-0 start, playing extremely well. Dobrev finding the way to win that night in that last game, and in the first game, the black side is Sicilian, and as you just point out, Wei Yi has seemed invincible thus far. So, all right, I'm going to put you on the spot, David. Your thoughts, Wei Yi versus Dobrev, what's going to happen?
That's fair. I was going to make you make a prediction too, Robert. So I'm going to go with Wei Yi is going to win. I can't believe everything that Dobrev's doing, and like, when you see just how pristine Wei Yi is, there's got to be some ceiling to what you can do when you're under 2,500 and you're streaming and you're managing and you're organizing. Like, there's got to be some limit. I mean, I'm blown away by his first 2 games, but I can't see him taking out Wei Yi also.
I mean, I would never underestimate Vlad Dobrev, but I also have to agree with you because Wei Yi, the way he's been playing so far, it's just, I mean, it's class. Just pure class thus far. And, he's still quite young. It's funny because Wei Yi feels like he's been around forever. But he's only 20 years old, despite the fact that he's been over 2,700 for such a long period of time. He's never quite made that leap into the 2,750, 2,760 range where he's getting Grand Chess Tour invites.
But he's still got time, right?
Exactly, right? He still has time to continue gaining points.
I think he's been the top junior in the year for 4 years. He was the number 1 rated player on the FIDE junior list. That's like very hard to do, right? Because it basically means like as you're turning 16, you have to somehow be like better than the top 18 and 19 year olds in the world. That's it's hard to do. Firouzja can take a shot at it himself now, right? Since he just turned 16 at 2,700, so he can try and be the top junior for the next 4 years. But that's like, I don't think anyone can do more than 4 years. It's
pretty much unheard of, as you're suggesting. And Firouzja now is about to overtake Wei Yi, depending on how he does in Vaikonze. And for a player like Firouzja, who's amazing, second place on tie breaks, tied for second through fourth in the World Rapid Championship, very formidable opponent in Blitz, as we saw him unfortunately lose that game to Magnus Carlsen because of him losing on time. But clearly, the guy can play chess at an exceptional level. We just haven't seen someone like Firouzja play the Super Grandmasters. We haven't seen him play the Magnus Carlsens, the Fabiano Caruanas, and it's just honestly a totally different game at that point because he's been beating up on 2600s, and when I look at that, I'm like, please somebody help me, because if I had to play Firouzja, it doesn't look good for my chances. But then you say, it's just different when you have to go every single game against Jan-Christoph Duda, Wesley So, Vishy Anand. There are just no breaks whatsoever in a format like that.
Yep. I think he'll be up to the task, but that'll be something for us to see, next week. For now, he's got to face Dobrev, and look how fast Dobrev's playing. I mean, there's only a 2-second increment, and he's building up time. How do you do that, man, against Wei Yi?
I think he just picked an opening where he feels very comfortable and confident, saying, I'll give you my c4 pawn, but I'm going to win it back. The only way you can defend such a pawn is by playing a pawn to b5, but then you look down the diagonal. It's a bishop on g2, a rook on a8, so b5 runs right into knight takes b5. Thematic in many Catalan-style positions. This isn't quite a Catalan, but you look at the bishop on the long diagonal, you can't get away with b5 pushes in most of them. So,
Oh man,
just
I seeing the time, I'm already like, did I pick right with Wei Yi here?
I was trying to make it a controversy, and I think that Dobrev's just up to the challenge. And here, once he gains the pawn back on c4, and the fact that Wei Yi is spending so much time in this moment, it really worries me about Wei Yi's position, because once that knight captures on c4, the bishop on g2 better than the bishop on e6. The bishop on g7 should be kind of the piece for black, but it's not really doing anything yet. If you play c5 to try to open the bishop on g7, you open the bishop on g2. That's the bigger problem. So bishop d2 to start with here. Don't give a knight b4, one of those annoying moves that makes your queen start having to run. So I would just play bishop d2 here. Maybe knight f4 as well, coming after your bishop on e6 is an option. I really like White's position. Maybe I'm overestimating it, but I just think Dobrev's in good shape.
Yeah, I don't yet see what Wei Yi's supposed to do. I've been looking at ideas of playing bishop to d5, partly because if Dobrev plays knight f4, I got to have some kind of a plan, right? But if Wei Yi plays bishop d5, so far it seems like Dobrev could always respond with e4, and then bishop e3 and cover everything, or rook d1. So I'm not yet seeing how Wei Yi establishes black's position here. For now, the bishop on e6 is just like a little bit, I don't know, floaty, right?
Yeah, it's not a square you want that bishop to be on. And, well, where else can it go? As you point out, any bishop d5, bishop f5 invites e4 with the tempo. And White wants that central expansion, but doesn't do it until he's ready. And he plays bishop d2, taking with the b4 square. What is black going to do now? Well, maybe some kind of queen c8 or queen d7 to go bishop h3. All right, he played knight to d5, so...
So he's kind of insisting on knight b4,
right,
hoping that it truly messes with White, right? So, I mean, like, what Dobrev has to calculate here is knight takes c4, knight d to b4, and then he has to check if he's bothered by it. Nah, he's not bothered. Nothing's bothering this guy. It's like, whatever, man.
He's in good form. He shouldn't be bothered. And Wei Yi plays rook c8. So as mentioned, the bishop on g7 wants to, be active, wants to get some play in the position. But is c5 going to solve all of black's problems or create new ones? As mentioned, the bishop on g2 now has a longer diagonal to work with.
Right. Well, he's looking for a shot to play c5. c5, e4, he'll have knight db4, and he'll have time to for things to work out for Wei Yi, for black, before White can play d4, d5.
Right.
If White plays queen b3 here to sort of get out of the way of knight b4 and the rook on c8, then knight to b6 is awfully unpleasant for him.
Yeah, it seems like just White needs to be able to find that concise way forward. You just need to just end and make a short story of it, and just be like, let's find one move that eliminates black's most active plans. And everything seems to allow c5 at this point. So maybe rook to. I can't tell if I should go rook d1 or rook c1.
I was looking at rook fd1, Robert, with the idea of answering c5 with e4 possibly.
I think the problem with that, though, is I can ignore the fact that my knight's hanging, just play c takes d4, because my rook on c8 is perfectly situated here to wreak havoc down the c file.
So you would sack the knight on d5 and it's all going to work out?
Yeah, I'll take back with my bishop on d5, and if we keep trading on the d5 square, and now your knight on c4 is under attack, I'm playing b5 next to work it against this pinned piece. d3 is a shot. Everything seems to be just miraculously working out for black.
Good call, Robert. It was not obvious to me that would work for black.
Yeah, because you never your first instinct never really is to just want to sacrifice a piece. But I was just relying on the fact that Wei Yi played rook to c8. What's his idea of putting the rook on c8? To play c5, of course, but also there's a stare down. Queen and rook on the same line. It almost always wins for the rook. The queen is a more valuable piece, so you don't want to be peering down the line at a rook.
Right. So what other moves do we have for Dobrev here, who's investing significant time here? We've got like queen a4 is a move that occurs to me. Trying to get off that c file.
trying to... I kind of want like some sort of rook c1 potentially to meet c5 with an e4 because my knight's protected. So like let's say I play, I don't know, rook a. I don't want to play rook f to c1 because I want my rook on d1.
No.
But let's just for argument's sake say rook f to c1.
Rook fc1.
If you play c5, my point is I think I get e4 in because now my knight's actually protected. But knight d to b4 and I lose the d pawn. No, okay, nothing's working out here. I don't like white's position anymore. I quit.
Right, we needed the rook on the d file to have sort of like d takes c5 type moves or have that fight against the black queen. He kind of needs to play rook fd1 and rook ac1 both at once here,
right,
to really have this position. So, how about knight a5, a queen a4, knight a5? Those are the two moves that I'm looking at.
But it's clear that the moves that we're talking about between the two of us, we're all coming up with like defensive ideas because we're really not enjoying the prospect of c5. So a move like knight a5, while it attacks b7 and puts some pressure on c6, a move like queen d7 as a response is like, well, what's your knight really doing out there on a5? I've stopped c5 temporarily, and maybe I'll play knight to b3 to continue stopping it, but it just feels like white is playing against black's ideas rather than creating ideas of his own.
Yeah, I mean, the knight coming to b3 doesn't feel like super promising long term. Black's always going to have knight b4, and then like a2 and b3 are sort of shaky.
Right.
All right. He brought the correct rook to c1. Why did you prefer rook f to c1?
Because of the a2 pawn. I was like,
because of the a2 pawn. So you're really worried about knight b4 here.
Some kind of b5, knight b4 situation. I don't know in what move order, but like let's say knight d to b4. Your queen will have to step into a potential pin, right? Bishop b4, knight b4, queen b3. Then I can give up my knight on b4 if I want to play b5. And I thought that with the two bishops for black and the position opening up, I thought black should be doing quite decently here.
Okay, so Wei Yi goes c5 anyway. And what do we expect here? I mean, you want to play e4, d5, but it seems like black could, e4, knight b4. Probably trade it once because our bishop's useless otherwise.
But I think white's just losing that knight on c4 in all these lines, right? Because the knight on b4 is not protected, and maybe you don't lose the knight because the rook's on c1, but the d4 pawn is hanging, and yeah, it looks iffy, to say the least.
So I'm thinking e4, knight b4, I trade once, and then I play queen a4.
Yeah, that makes sense. But even like bishop takes d4 there for black, I don't really think black can be unhappy about the position, right? It's like, your queen can go on a journey and take that pawn a7 if you really, really want to. But I feel like white is playing catch up. White is trying to hold off black rather than play for any advantage. It's just one of those unfortunate situations where your center collapses too quickly. He took on c5 though, and just rook takes c5. I mean, somehow Wei Yi got out of this. I didn't like his position about 4 moves ago, but somehow he was tricky and managed to get away with what now looks like a very pleasant situation. Queen on c2 has been misplaced.
Yeah. Shushan, you just offered a draw in sort of a random position, and I wonder if like the Pandas are starting to try and see the finish line, like to start to like take strategic draws because they're comfortable with where they're at in the match. I think the board on which they're really comfortable is Won Yang against Pavel Anisimov, and I don't know if you want to take your eyes off of these two players who are 2-0 at all this round, but if you do, you could check that game at some point.
Yeah, I brought that game up here, David, and how many pawns is white up?
White's up 1 pawn only. The real thing is the sort of coordination, right? The D file, the black king blocking the rooks. It's the difference in activity between the rooks that's really critical. And now he wants to create a real problem for that bishop on c6. That's what I would want to do too, because that bishop by itself is holding black together, right? It's stopping white from getting a rook to d7, which would end the game.
And honestly, when I look at this position, the first thing that comes to mind is the opposite colored bishops. But then I look and I say, okay, white's up a pawn. And then most importantly, as you point out, black has no coordination. And if I'm looking at this position and I say, how can white improve? I put my bishop from e3 to e5. That feels like the square, because from e5, I hit the g7 square. I would love to kind of just improve the quality of my pieces. So a move like bishop d4 to e5 now sort of speaks to me, and I don't see how black gets activity at all, because it's queen f4. Maybe wants to put the queen on e5 instead, but either way, I just love
interesting. Queen f4, I didn't really see. I was looking at the f1 rook in this position, Robert. I knew that my bishop could come to hit g7 at some point, but I was trying to pick between like rook d1 and rook e1, right? Like, do I tie a black rook to e8 to defend the e6 pawn, or do I go for the d7 square? I guess he wanted to play rook e1, and he may have actually feared bishop takes f3.
Right.
And that may be why he took the time for queen f4.
Yes, right, because any rook move, you lose the pawn f3, so he decided to prepare it, and now we get the game where kind of combining both of our ideas. So all the ideas we've talked about, that's just how good White's position is, that you can take the time to play everything you want. You can play rook e1, bishop d4, put the bishop on e5, expand on the king side. He'll go king f2, rook h1.
I wonder if he's even looking at like, g4, h5 to restrict the black queen, even though like it creates some counterplay for black. But
black can't do anything right now. So whether he plays for g4, it's an interesting question. I think he's going to play king f2, rook h1, rook h3, rook lift that thing up to the g3 square, and then say, where's your queen going? And there's king f2.
Yeah.
He honestly might bring his king over to the queen side. Look, like, this king could end up on b3 at some point to help play a4.
He has a lot of pawns there.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not even to shelter the king. It's to finish that rolling of pawns that I wanted earlier.
Yep. Because if my king
like that.
is over here, I'm playing a4 and b5. So I don't really see what black is doing. Is g5 really going to happen? That seems to only make black's life more difficult. And if the queens get traded, then this plan of king over to the queen side makes perfect sense. I think this is going to be a roll for...
I really wanted to play b5 for white, so I love your idea of running the king there.
The pawn needs some support, so might as well use the king as the lifeline. So, okay, this looks terrible for the Wizards. What are any of the other games looking particularly interesting?
The other games aren't really like decided, So I was just, Xu Xiangyu had made this like draw offer against Demidov in the end game, and I thought maybe he's looking over and saying like, hey, we're up one game. Wen Yang is like totally in control. I'm very confident in Wei Yi today. Like, maybe he's starting to like count the points.
But that's a dangerous mindset to be in, isn't it? Where
it would be very early in one of these matches to do that. But we've got a queen sack from Dobrev, so I think we got to look at that before we talk too deep about the match strategy.
Well, where did his queen go? So he went knight d4 after rook takes c5.
And by sack, I mean, he doesn't seem to have anything for it, actually. Hang on.
So how did this happen? Queen b3, rook c4, rook c5, b5. After b5, he played rook takes b4 because he didn't want to play bishop takes b4. Bishop c4 then hits the queen on b3 and the rook on f1. And I guess Wei Yi was just tactically alert, and that's a big issue for Dobrev. So he played rook takes b4 thinking that bishop b4 is losing an exchange, and he figured that this would give him better chances. And I actually kind of agree with the decision. If you're choosing between two options that of course favor white, I think the material imbalance gives white better chances to hold. And the rook and bishop, well, it's actually really rook and two bishops against a queen and knight. So you say, wait, knight and bishop equal. Not in this position, right? The bishops are great pieces here. The black king, if I could take over the dark squares, might not find true safety. And also importantly, white doesn't have any real weaknesses left to take advantage of. So wait, aren't I going to double my rooks in the 7th rank if you...
Yeah, the knight seems quite sorry at the moment, actually.
Yeah, a3, kick that knight. Where's the knight going?
c2?
Oof, I love how you said it, but we're like, I'm not really sure that knight should go there. But maybe, because the knight on c2 is pestering my bishop on e3, so...
That's how I suggest a move when I know I'm winning the game easily. c2...
Well, I guess another question is trading off a pair of rooks good for white or good for black? Right? We should ask these sort of transition questions. Trading off a knight for bishop, amazing for black. That is very clear.
We don't need to ask that one.
We definitely don't need to ask that. The bishops are great. They can go on, the different diagonals. The bishop on g2 is the full length of the diagonal. There's nothing there, but it still is a very attractive looking piece. The knight on b4, it's squirming around trying to make things happen. But from the rook perspective, I'm wondering if rook a to d7 with rook d8 check, that kind of maneuver will help white, or I think it helps black. I think there are fewer things you have to defend with the one pair of rooks traded, whereas rook d to d7 is coming, hitting the e7 pawn, creating some difficulties for black.
I agree with you. I think it's also a factor of like the strength of the bishop pair translates to the black rook not being so useful.
Yep.
And so relatively speaking, if he could trade off his rook, I think it helps him a little bit. I've played a couple times games with like where like I had a rook that was just hampered by a bishop pair. Sometimes my opponent sacked an exchange and then they've got like a bishop pair and somehow I can't use my rook. And this feels like one of those situations where Wei Yi's rook is not very useful, and therefore if he could trade it, he would be happy.
I think we're in complete agreement. And another thing to point out is that with the rooks on the board, the white king is extremely safe still. Bishop on g2, bishop on e3, cover all the important squares around that king. The black king, on the other hand, could fall victim to an attack because there aren't so many pieces in front of it. Now, attacking that king legitimately will not be easy, but a rook d to d7, right? If that e7 pawn falls, all of a sudden there are more targets in black's position. And with the rook on d7, I can play bishop g5 after that, continuing to increase the pressure on black's position. I'm starting to like white. It's weird because I know that, maybe I shouldn't like the position so much, but I just don't see any progress to be made for black, which allows me to then say, okay, I'm liking white's chances. Yeah,
me too, Robert. I honestly, the more I look at it, the more it starts to feel like hopeless. I don't even know what to do here. He has allowed bishop h3, so what's his idea? He wants to...
Okay, he didn't play bishop h3, but actually, let's go back a move. What was wrong with bishop h3? f5 is the only move, right? Unless you're... Is there another move besides f5?
There's no move now. It's over, man.
Oh my gosh!
Blundered. He just blundered, and Dobrev has like done it. Everything. He's done everything.
What a hero! An f6. That's blunder of the week. That.
Maybe, but he was under so much pressure, Robert. It's not blunder of the week if he was losing. It's kind of a blunder, but if he was losing, what was he supposed to do?
Just play rook e8.
Rook e8, and then when the rook's double...
I'm not happy about black's position, let me be clear. But it's not losing, right? It's just like it's not lost. It might be worse, but you still can play a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, what an end to this game.
It's true. It is too early to resign, and after bishop d5, it is not too early to resign. So in that sense, it makes a big difference, yeah.
Yeah, so what a turn of events here. And that's what we were talking about. It's too early for China to start making draws, unless the position is dead equal, to start trying to get half points here. Actually, let's go to the game between Anisimov and Wen Yang, because all of a sudden it's not looking so clear to me that white is doing nearly as well as he was earlier. Look at this king on f1. It's not safe either.
Yeah, it's pretty messy here. If I were to evaluate it, I would call it messy. I wouldn't call it plus. I wouldn't call it minus. I wouldn't call it unclear even. I would call it messy.
How about rook to g5? Kick that bishop off that central square.
And also set up, queen b1, king h2, rook h5 at some point, right?
Exactly what I was looking for.
It's like you got something else coming too.
But the reason I don't like this particular move order is white doesn't have to play king back to g1, because queen h5 check will force the king back to g1 anyway. Whereas if we just go back 2 moves and the king was started on g1, rook g5 forces a bishop move. You can't play bishop f4 because e5 comes in with a fork on those pieces.
Also, he could play a move like queen d6 now, right? And then he's planning to, play queen e7 in case of rook g5 and sort of start counterattacking.
And look at that move, rook e3, a very useful move for white. Now the king actually might go to g3.
Clearing g3 for the king to hide in.
Whoa.
What?
Yeah, that's a surprising move.
Wait a minute.
There's no rook h8, so he's okay for the moment.
Okay.
Because
you just see that shortage of liberties on the king. You're like, it almost reeks of a self-mate.
Exactly, right? Like some kind of rook h8 sort of maneuver. Like for example, if rook h8, king g1, if that had to play that, rook h1 check wins the game. King takes h1, queen f1 check, and mate you on g2.
That's what I was looking for. It's like something's going to happen where like a rook sacks and then the queen like gets to g2.
And king f7. Where's this king going? Like
I don't know. I don't know where either king's going, Robert. They both don't seem to understand the danger that they're in.
I think white is just getting the upper hand here. So firstly, you can trade queens if you want. Queen f2 check. I wouldn't do that. Queen f4. Okay, where is this black king going? So queen f5. What about just queen d6? I like your move from earlier. Bring that queen in.
Queen c7 could be good too at this point.
Yeah, you have so many options. And the black
then
king,
rook f1, right? Queen c7, rook f1. It's got to be dead now, honestly. That has to be the end. Because if the white queen gets to f7 and covers all the light squares, you know white already had the dark squares the whole time with bishop g3 to f4.
Yep.
So it's over?
How about rook g7, only move? Because you're trying to mate me on f7, so rook g7 is like okay, I don't really want to get into these end games because it still looks bad, but I might have to.
You're so annoying. You stopped me from mating.
My bad, David. We're friends. I want to do what's best for you, but sometimes, can't let you checkmate.
No mate.
Yeah, no mate.
Can I at least win a pawn with rook f5, rook c7, rook f4?
That's what I was thinking, but I think if you transition into, let's say after rook takes f4, you're trying to go rook takes g4 with check. I was going to think about some kind of king move, but I don't know, like king g5? And if you take
all right, I'm okay with this. The fight goes on, right?
No, the fight continues.
So he wants to go like queen f6 check and bishop e5. Black, I mean, the main move I would look at for black would be queen c2, hoping that the mate threat on g2 restrains white.
Yep.
And you got queen f6, king h7, queen h4, king g8.
So how is white going to... You're going to play queen f2? Ooh. Okay, I thought he was going to play queen f2, but he... Because how do you actually defend this mate? Like, if you go rook f2, I always have queen e1 check, but then I guess your king sits back on h2. But then rook h7. I mean, there's so many different ideas in this position. So is he just going to queen d2 and protect it that way, but c4 is hanging? And if the problem with losing c4 is that any end game is now immediately going to be a draw, right? Like, this c4 pawn is critical to eventually playing a b5 push. And this
He's got 36 seconds.
Okay.
He seems to be repeating. I don't recommend queen h2. I highly don't recommend queen h2.
Yeah, queen h2, rook h7. That's
he's going to take the draw is my feeling. I feel like he's about to take a draw.
Okay, let's see. Would I try queen d2? Because I said c4.
Oh, he so should have won this game. He so should have won this game. And Tomashevsky woke up and won a game.
Yes, he did.
Tomashevsky has won a game. He's on the board. That queen on e3 is pretty strong.
And with that win by Tomashevsky and the win by Dobrev, we have a tie match, right? Or
I think Russia's taking the lead.
Russia's taking
I think
the
they were only
lead.
down 1.
Wow.
I think they've taken the lead.
Wow, that's crazy.
This is intense. Okay, Wen Yang did not take the draw. I approve. Got to go for something.
We were talking about how China might be trying to make draws because they're up by a game. Now they're trying to get wins because they're losing.
Because they're down.
Oh my gosh, what a hole!
Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Oh man.
I mean, I'm looking at this final position, and right before we take our break, I'm going to take us back to move like, what was it, 25 or so?
You're going to contrast this with the complete domination. Choose your way to win.
Right, black is nothing. You put that bishop on e5. I mean, he really did that, and yet somehow black still got out in an open board. So I don't know exactly where Wen Yang went wrong, but it's very clear that he did go wrong. And instead of a closed board where only white can win a game like this because, black is down a pawn, white is dominating all the squares, no actual plan for black, then we get to the end position where...
Move 45, Robert, hg5, hg5.
Yep.
How about queen to c1 there instead of queen d4? I know the center is supposed to be good.
I love it. This going to the h file with everything.
Maybe that's where he missed it, because that looks done.
It is done. No, queen c1's a great move.
Is it?
And
okay.
Retreating moves, David, are the hardest ones to play, especially when your queen can go to d4. It's such a nice active square. Applying more pressure on the dark square diagonal there. But queen c1 threatening rook h3, rook h1, all of that, because after queen to d4, that happened in the game, right? He played pawn to g4, and there's no rook h1, which you would have if your queen was on c1. So
right,
huge.
And if black tries to run with his queen to e8 and king to g6, then there's queen g5, right? So the queen on c1 actually hits the two squares g5 and h1 that white needs, not queen d4.
Yep. So, unfortunately for China, Wen Yang could not convert on this. But fortunately for Russia, they scored 2 huge victories led by Vlad Dobrev. We will take a short break, and when we come back, it will be the final round of action from our primetime matchup between China and Russia. Do not go anywhere. You will not want to miss this. So stay tuned. And we are back, and we have the key game of our primetime matchup between the China Pandas and the Russian Wizards. Wei Yi taking on Evgeny Tomashevsky. It will definitely be an exciting affair. David, well, we are in the final round of action right now. We know that the Russia Wizards have a 1-point lead over the China Pandas. Do you think Russia will be able to hold on now that they finally got taken control of the match? Oop. All right, sorry, David. You there? I think you muted yourself, David, somehow. I don't hear you.
I'm going to switch to a second microphone for a
now
second.
I can hear you. There you are.
Okay.
You're back.
I just switched to a second microphone. I don't know what happened with the first one. It looked okay. But
well, I missed you. You know, I was just like, well, David, I'm talking to you, and I was getting nervous.
Oh, yeah. I understand now. I couldn't see you, so I couldn't see that you were nervous. I was like, what's Robert worrying about? Okay, so I was trying to say that it looks like the Russians have woken up and they'll be the favorites to take this home this round, even though they were considered by many people the underdog, including by the commissioner, Greg Shahade. They were considered underdogs going into this match today.
Yeah, you know, they may have been underdogs, but putting up a fierce resistance. And, well, right now we have the matchup between Wei Yi and Evgeny Tomashevsky. We have Wei Yi. All the players are on camera. We brought up Wei Yi to see, you know, he looks pretty relaxed. I see some clothing in the background there. He just is chilling. He always kind of seems composed. And, David, what do you think about the opening choice here by Tomashevsky to enter a King's Indian variation and for Wei Yi to choose the line he's chosen with the early H3?
Well, I would say there's nothing professorial about playing the King's Indian defense. This is an opening that I don't have the highest opinion of. So I think he's I don't know, maybe taking surprising risks to me in this round, given that Russia's now up a point. I would have expected some kind of a Queen's Gambit declined. Yep,
I mean, that would be the very solid approach, but well, he says the King's Indian, and well, it seems up a point. So why go for the King's Indian? You know, he of course is a very strong player. He knows his openings, but what he continues to do, David, which worries me, is the time situation. Now, you know, spending a minute this early, not the biggest deal in the world, but I feel like the trajectory has been Tomashevsky spends a minute, he spends another minute. Next thing you know, he has 2 minutes to his opponent's 5, and that's where it all goes wrong.
Yeah, you got to be careful with your minutes when you don't have more minutes than you have pawns. But I mean, I'm shocked. Like his last round game where he won his first game of the match in round 3. I looked it over and it was exactly like what you said, professorial. Yep. You know, it was he ground an opposite colored bishop ending with like a positional advantage. And I expected him to do the drawing version of that this round, you know, Queen's Gambit decline and just technical neutralization. Instead, we're going to have like a fight. And I'm happy to see that, but I'm shocked.
Yep. And fight here. And normally when we see a King's Indian, Black wants to get an F5 break in, try to open up this bishop on G7. But with this variation with H3, White often actually plays G4 himself, saying you're not opening the king side unless you were checkmated. But here with the early, you know, rook on C1, push on the center with D5, I think White has made his intentions pretty clear. Keep the position locked up for as long as possible. Decide, do you want to play G4? You might not want to, but this D6 pawn is always the one that Black needs to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I don't really know exactly what's coming. I would just be playing quickly here since I wouldn't know what to do. I'd just make some moves, Robert.
Yep. And he went knight to C5, which, well, it already begs the question, at some point, can I take this knight on C5 and then try to win the E5 pawn?
Mm-hmm. That's going to be hard to do if you're not castled. I mean...
Yeah, it's true. This king is right in the center. So anytime you take an E5 pawn, there'll be a rook E8 to meet it. So knight D2, very calm approach for Wei Yi. Yeah, I think we're just in solid opening territory, and I'm just going to try to keep my eye on as many games as possible because it's such a close match. This is our marquee matchup, but we do have 3 other games going on.
Yep. clicking around. Anisimov has played another fairly limp London, like he did in the first round, losing to Wei Yi, and Xu Xiangyu is threatening to thrash it similarly.
I also love that you called it a limp London. That's feels like great alliteration and pretty fair. So
I mean, the London like starts out as having a great potential for being limp, but this one particularly so, right? I mean, it's like how much does Black get out of the opening?
No, you're right. And I pulled up Xu Xiangyu on camera here. We see him playing. He's been actually having a very good day, with the exception of his game against Dobrev. But Dobrev is just an all-star. But Xu Xiangyu with a very nice first victory over Evgeny Tomashevsky.
Yeah. He's done his job today. Playing on board 4 for the first time in his life, pretty much, or maybe in some kids tournament when he was 6 in China, he played on board 4, but it's been a while.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you take away the rating averages. Well, you can have a 25-82 on board 4. Not bad at all. And with the black pieces, looks very, very solid for him. No weaknesses that white can take advantage of. Well, maybe some of the light squares on the queen side at some moment could provide some infiltration opportunities with the queen a6 or bishop a6, but with his bishop just sitting beautifully on e4, I'm not really sure how white expects to obtain an advantage.
All right. White's really in some kind of turtling mode, right? I mean, he's going to play a move like knight d2 because otherwise the bishop on e4 is too strong. Well, that's out. No more knight d2.
I mean, if you want to give us an easy day of commentating, play knight d2 and allow queen.
Yeah, play knight d2. Then you'll save Wei Yi from blunder of the week when he allowed bishop d5.
Yep.
Robert will switch it up if you allow mate in 1 in a position where you weren't under as much pressure.
Well, let me ask you, David, why didn't he play knight d2 last week? Like, what was the advantage of putting your queen on a4 instead of playing knight d2 right away?
I don't know. I expected knight d2. I think queen a4, like the point is that the queen's a little bit stronger there, right? She hits the weak light squares that you were mentioning. She makes Black have to keep his knight on c6 defended. But honestly, the bishop on e4 is so strong that I would have played knight d2 because I would have not really wanted to tolerate that bishop.
Yep.
In my experience, when somebody's got a strong piece on a square like e4, it could be some other sort of central outpost, the longer you wait to challenge it, the worse it gets. So, I mean, I'll basically just challenge it the very first move I can.
Yep, that's pretty reasonable. And rook g1 is allowing for it. But look at white. I mean, as you said, turtling up, right? This is not even the Ljubljana turtles from a previous season. This is just getting very set. Like queen f5 now takes away your knight d2 move because not only is f2 hanging, queen takes h3 is checkmate because the pawn on g2 is pinned. So, I mean,
I'm on the same page as you. I'm all about queen f5 here.
Right? Just my idea is queen f5, rook d6, swing my rook over somewhere on the king side, and I mean white's position is bad.
Like h6 so that you can take on h3 no matter what white does.
Yeah, exactly. He played queen f6, and he's saying knight d2 is still not possible because the f2 pawn is hanging, so that's a fair point. But I wonder why f6 rather than f5. I really like the queen on f5 to bring the rook into the game via the 6th rank, and the queen on f6 just blockades the progress of a...
everything seemed to be perfect about the queen f5, rook d6 idea. This move maybe looks at playing pawn d4 at some point, which is like the other way to try and crack the game. If you feel like white is... if you feel like... white is going to be able to cover his king, but he's sort of like discoordinated. He's a little scattered between a queen on a4, rook on g1. You play rook c to d7, most likely, and then d4 should also be comfortable for black.
Yeah, you will see massive trades, but black will have control over an open file. And I mean, I still just like putting my rook on playing queen f5 now. Like, admit that you made a mistake the first time around, and then play queen f5, play rook. I moved it like a knight. A rook d6, bring it over to the 6th rank. You can even play rook. He played rook c d7. I was going to say rook to e7. What is this? Queen d1, queen e1, protecting the f2 pawn. So this slow approach, I mean, it really just, you have to punish this. d4 now, as you were saying. Yeah?
Demidov Yang for a second.
Okay.
Rook to e8 just played after 3 minutes of thought. What happens on bishop takes f6 here?
That is a great question. I'll bring up Wen Yang here, but let's bring up Demidov because he's sweating this one out here. And so what happens after bishop f6? The point is after gf6, queen takes e8 check, queen e8, knight f6 check, and oops, that is a fork.
Okay.
So let's.
So what's the point? Wen Yang thought for 3 minutes. I need you to GM this for me.
Whoa! What? Queen
That
D6?
was the plan?
And Demidov is just like, what just happened here? So Queen D6, saying that this bishop now is really under attack. The rook on 8 protects the rook on 8. I want to show that one more
Queen
time.
D2? Queen D2, Robert?
Okay.
I mean, White doesn't have to do anything fancy. This is like...
He'll take on F6,
risky.
and after Queen H6 against Bishop G6, and
Yeah.
holding on by
H4, H5?
I mean, I'm with you. It looks
This
like
was his plan? He spent 3 minutes to play rook E8, bishop F6, and like, oops.
I hope he's worked this out because it looks very scary. And I just want to, where you brought our attention to this game, great eye, by the way, David, is bishop F6 played. The point is to rook E2, bishop takes D8. You can't just go and take this bishop back, and that's an extra piece right now because the rook on E2 is actually under attack. So rook C2, I guess, is possible there, but there's all these hanging pieces, and you have to figure everything out. Maybe it actually works out okay for black, so maybe you should have gone for this because I'm starting to agree with you, David, in the game after the take. 90. What is?
Why not just move the queen, man?
Well, he wanted to win this pawn, but black was up a pawn, so we should.
Yeah, but kill him, man. Stop worrying about your pawn.
Yeah, well, Wen Yang looks very chill. Like I just brought
the
him.
The guy was like serving his king. He was like, take on F6. Maybe I'll take back with my G pawn. Maybe I'll play down a piece.
I mean, I wish I had all the answers here, but he said I'm just going to take the pawn, and I'm going to do what Andreykin did to Magnus Carlsen in the World Blitz Championship, which was put pressure on the F7 pawn, claim that my control over the D file, I'm the first to an open file, is going to be good. But no, I mean, I ultimately agree with you, David, that those other lines look scarier for black. Perhaps they were okay.
Well, now that he didn't play Queen D2, I'm ready to see another game. How about Dobrev? Let's check in on the number one star of the entire match so far today, who has just gone hunting on A2. It looked to me like positionally kind of scary for him, this white pawn in the center. He had the bishop pair for it, but it felt like one of those positions where, the knight and the pawn in the center are so strong that the bishop pair is not fully compensating that. And now he's grabbing the pawn on A2. And I think that Dobrev often is very scrappy, finds chances that aren't necessarily immediately instinctively positionally obvious.
Right. And he's doing that right now here. And I mean, the queen on A2 doesn't have that many moves, right? It can go back to A6 and that's it, where it came from. So rook E3 is my first thought of, can I go and trap this queen with rook E3 to A3? Because rook E3, actually, how do you stop rook A3? If you take on B2, you're walking right into a pin along the second rank, right? So you can't just go ahead and take this pawn. And so if you can't go bishop B2 after rook E3, it's like queen A6.
Maybe he wants to trade his queen for a rook and piece again, since it went so well against Wei Yi.
Yeah, make a questionable sacrifice and hope that it works out. But I was just thinking, if I can get my rook to A3 like this, and I have my passed D pawn, it just feels like White has a very good position here without anything to worry about. And anytime you have a pawn on the 5th rank, you have to consider pawn in D6. But he started with.
So he plays another way, still going for the queen trap on A1.
Mm-hmm.
But also taking his bishop off of the A8 diagonal. I was looking at rook E3 in your line, rook E3, B5, rook A3, queen C4. Kind of like Dobrev style. But let's turn our attention to bishop F1. So rook A1's threatened. The obvious move would be to try and run away through A6. Then you have to look at every knight move. I guess 20 seconds allowed him to do that.
Yep.
And
I'm looking at D6.
Can't really hit anything.
I'm looking at D6 because when you have a pawn,
keep the queen.
Yeah, when you have a pawn on the 5th rank, you should always consider pushing it. Don't always push it, but consider it.
Always consider it. Fair.
But he plays queen B3. Actually, I like this strategy as well. You're just sitting on the position, and now rook A1 is going to try to trap this queen because the queen had the B. Whoa, that's a committal decision and a half.
Well, there goes that pawn. Knight A3 will clean that up.
Yep, thank you for this pawn here. But maybe knight A3, there's queen A4, interestingly. Because if I trade off the queens, the B2 pawn is a huge weakness here. So a move like queen A4 is possible. Or maybe rook B8 and just hoping that there's going to be a pin along the B file. But somehow some of these positions, black still might have hope because of this pawn on B2 as a target. I don't know. It looks a little sketchy, but I feel like I've learned to trust Dobrev even when I don't understand what he's doing.
It's true. It's true. We are learning that a little bit today. It's like, yeah, even if it doesn't look right, maybe there's still a point.
Well, now we're going to see some mass exchanges. Rook b8 at the end here. Thank you for your b2 pawn. And does White actually have enough material to try to put this game away? That's what I'm...
Well, yeah, I don't know. He could try... I mean, he's got several candidate moves, right? I mean, like knight d7 is playable. There's a few things that he could try.
So knight d7, I think, bishop d7, rook b2, and
yep.
You have this passed d pawn, which is of course your calling card in a position like this. But my bishop on f6 is doing well to not only protect the d8 square, but perhaps to go to d4, and my a pawn can start pushing. And
yeah, I can't get the pawn to d7, which is what I would need to do to really have an advantage there. I need to be able to play like bishop e8, d6,
right,
or something. So I can't quite do that. So he just gives the b pawn and keeps the pieces on the board. That makes sense.
But now another issue is that
this lets him push for control of the d7 square.
Can he just take on e5 and put his rook behind the pass pawn with rook to d2? Nope, he didn't do it.
Maybe he was afraid of rook c8, d7,
Ooh.
And then he can't stop rook e8, probably.
Oh, I think he can, but by the hair on his chinny chin chin with rook to c1 check. Oh wait, rook c1 check. The bishop covers d1. Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I'd have to go like rook f8 and be like super passive and hope that my rook on d2 just covers. But after rook e8, there's no way black is making progress here. You're kind of stuck. I think it's like mutually stuck position.
Well, White has the plan of like running their king up to e file and then moving the bishop from like c6 to d5 at some point.
It's too long of a story. We don't have enough time for this.
I know.
I agree with you. That black.
I'm sure you can follow it, but we'll get back to the rest of this battle.
So bishop e6 is the sane move, just avoiding any of these sacrifices, saying, if you go d7, I'll just can plant a rook on d8. The bishop on e6 closes the e file off from the rook on e1. He played d7, but...
All right, but d8 is the last square to break. It's a dark square. It's not the easiest square to take control of.
I like rook d2. Just
Yep.
There it is.
You always do. You always do.
Just take care of the pawn, and just don't let it push.
Saying Wei Yi is losing. Somebody in chat claims that Wei Yi is losing.
So let's check it out. Wei Yi versus Tomashevsky. We have this game up now.
We do want to know if he's losing. To me, it still looks complicated, but is there like a specific tactic coming in here? Knight f4 and queen takes e4, Robert?
Oh.
Yep.
Nice. There's a pin
Our
here.
commentator was correct.
That's a big...
oh, except he says not anymore losing. What? Now I'm confused.
Maybe losing was strong, but I didn't even look at the position. What just happened? There's a rook take on c8. So in this position, he went knight d3, rook c8, bishop c8, knight f3, and then maybe knight f4 check was the mistake. I don't know. Queen takes e4 might run into bishop takes c8. So there's a lot to figure out here.
Yeah.
But
okay, they're saying queen e4 was strong before, but I mean, it looks really strong here too.
Yeah, looks really good for black. How could it not be, right? At the end of the day, I'm going to take your bishop on f4. Yeah. That opens up my beautiful bishop in the dark squares, and this rook on f8 might make its way down to c2. The a2 pawn stuck in its tracks. That's the weakness in the position, and the rook on g4 is misplaced.
So I don't think he needs to rush to take on f4, right, Robert? Right. There's no threat of the bishop moving from f4 right now, so he could play a move like rook c8.
Yep. So I'll give you a queen d2 to protect the f4 square. You did it?
He did it. He played rook c8. And I mean, if that a2 pawn drops, then it's over,
Yep, just rook c8. The bishop's pinned. So go for rook to c2. And I guess now White has to force the issue. Queen e3 would be a nice move, except for queen f5 hits the rook on g4. And the whole point of queen e3 is you can't take me on e3. I take with my bishop then, and I end up a piece. And even there, black has great chances because rook c2.
Even there, that black would play rook c2, and white would play for a draw up a piece.
It's crazy.
Okay, so rook h4. He's trying to force things by threatening to save his bishop.
Right.
And so the question is, if black played like rook c2, he's going to play like bishop takes e5 or something, and So
But what about queen c2?
Tomashevsky's just going to trade this off.
Can you go queen c2? Same idea with
Yeah.
trying to get to the a pawn. Any
Yeah.
endgame
If
is
you can
great.
just get to that A pawn, it's over. And honestly, every endgame's pretty bad for white. The middle games are pretty bad too because his king's more exposed.
Yep.
So I think this game is really going Tomashevsky's way. Baijinshi and Dobrev have reached an endgame. Dobrev got that D7 pawn that we were watching. He dealt with it somehow.
So I'll just pull the board up. Okay, opposite color bishop endgame should be a draw with proper play, and it probably will be a draw. Just
So Dobrev will go undefeated. That much we can already say. I mean, he's 3-0, and there's no way Black's going to lose this.
No way at all. But this has a little bit less life. We'll keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on all the games. But right now, our attention with Wei Yi and Tomashevsky, our key matchup of the day here. And, I mean, queen on e3, 13 seconds left. What's he even going for here? Knight d4. Oh, I like that move. You can't take the knight on d4 because queen d4, there'll be a rook h4 and try to mate you on the dark squares.
Yeah.
And if that knight gets to c6, there's knight e7 check with Anastasia's mate.
Yep.
Wait,
why did that rook have to go back to f8?
It didn't? So
I mean, I blinked, and so he played queen c2, queen e3.
Oh, that's why. After queen takes a2, there's rook takes f7, and if king f7, queen e6 check.
Yeah.
Ooh, so maybe the black king is weaker than we thought.
Man, Wei Yi just turned this on its head. Like the moment we thought like, oh, looks good for black, let's go look over here for a second.
And the guy still looks cool as a cucumber. Brought Wei Yi back on screen, and he just is. He's hanging out. And
I've never seen Wei Yi have an expression, man.
Well, it helps his chess. He just doesn't want to be too emotive. And right now, what does black even?
Well, China needs it. I mean, they're down a point, and we're not really seeing where they're getting that point, right? So, 10 seconds left for Wei Yi. He's that stops knight c6 for a moment, perhaps, or does it? Knight c6, queen e3, knight e7, queen e7. Yes, it does. Okay,
barely.
Just checking, man.
Oh,
okay. Can he now trade on d4?
He has to. I mean, there's no way you can allow this knight to c6 and this beautiful outpost square, light square there, threatening knight e7 check. So I think you have to start trading on d4.
So queen c5, that was a clutch defense from Tomashevsky. Like anything else was going to get pretty scary.
Right. Because these kind of queen trades, I mean, queen c5, the problem is knight c6 is queen takes d5 with check. So he was actually
we had a drawn rook endgame between Anisimov and Xu Xiangyu. That's slightly unfortunate for China, right? Yep. When you're down a game, every draw, it's sort of like ticking away in the last round. That's when it sort of gets there.
Although, is one of these players having a pass pawn a7? Who is this?
That's the Russian player Demidov. It looks like he's going to basically clinch the match here. No,
Demidov trying to promote that pawn.
There's nowhere for the black king to avoid rook to d8. So it looks done.
Knight d6, take my knight, please.
Knight d6, please take my knight. No, he didn't take it.
Nope. And that is a win for Russia. Huge win for Russia. Demidov wins that one, and that means it's a 2-point lead.
Right. The Chinese would have to win both remaining games in order to tie this match. Let's see.
I think they've
got
no
this
chances.
rook endgame.
Oh.
I mean, I rely on Tomashevsky in a rook endgame. The other game is an opposite colored bishop ending. There's no way Dobrev's going to lose that. He's up 2 pawns now. He's just trying to win it.
He's trying to win it.
He just wants the 4-0. He's like, my team woke up. For the first 2 rounds, I was the only buddy awake.
Yep.
Finally, they got embarrassed. Like, we're going to let the lowest rated player on our team carry us the whole way while we do nothing.
And it's official. The match has to be done because Wesley So is in the game chat, by the way, and I see him writing, flag! Like, watch out! But Wei Yi accepts the draw. There.
I just saw Baijinshi, by the way, speaking of flags, go down to 0.4 seconds in this opposite colored bishop ending. And now 0.0 seconds, which is even worse.
What? He lost on time?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I think he didn't know what to do anymore. Did it look like Dobrev was winning the game anyway somehow?
Yeah, I guess he's bringing his king to help the a-pawn. And very importantly, black still has his f6 pawn. Because without this f6 pawn, you sacrifice your bishop on e8 for the a-pawn. And once again, h4 pawn does on the light square promoting, and it's a dark square bishop. So the f pawn wins the game for Dobrev. He brings his king over the queen side, pushes the pawn down, and then wins the bishop for it. So Dobrev, the hero for Team Russia, and they've won the match.
Robert, look what he did at move 38. this move like King D3 from Bai Jinqi, I mean, this was probably a game that you were assuming would end in a draw, right?
Yep.
But King D3 may be a slight mistake, moving too far away from the kingside pawns before having safeguarded them. Maybe with the king on E2, white needs to defend with a move like H4, trying to set up like F3, G4, H5 kind of, defensive pawns. A lot of the times in the endgame, you see the weaker side trying to play like H4 or H5 as black, right? And sort of. But as soon as he goes King D3, Bishop G1 hitting that pawn, Bishop H2 hitting that pawn, King F4, and he's clearly in trouble.
Yeah, he brought his king the wrong way and gave the dark squares up, and then that king infiltrated. And, initially it just looked like a pretty dead draw, but the problem is now this H3 pawn. You're giving black a second pawn, and as you were saying, Dave, if that pawn was an H5, just a draw. The opposite colored bishop's a draw. But instead, well, we saw that Vlad Dobrev is a legend. He's kind of the hero of today. And, well, I mean, what do you make of that for Russia? If they can win with this lineup, wait until all their heavy hitters are in.
If Dobrev can go 4-0, it doesn't even matter what 2700 they play. Like, you cannot go 4-0 in this new league. I don't know how he did that. I mean, I saw how Ray Robson did it, and it seems sort of possible, but, like, how did Dobrev do that, man?
I don't know, but, well, he is rating 2478 in classical. His world rank is somewhere in the over 1,000. I didn't even know that. 1268, but his score was a perfect 4 out of 4. So his pro chess league performances, his rating belies just how strong he is. And I never take that number seriously next to his name because the classical chess rating, and this is anything but a long time control.
Wow. Well, what's your blunder of the week? Is it F6 Bishop D5 or is it 38 King D3? Losing this opposite colored bishop ending.
I'm an endgame guy, so honestly, this King D3 move that might have to win blunder of the week.
That was pretty bad, right? In a sense, like.
I mean, pretty bad in a sense is clearly underplaying just how bad it was because this is Grandmaster Bai Jinqi here. This isn't someone who's just learning to play. He spent 15 seconds and played King to D3 here, whereas as you were pointing out, just putting your pawns on light squares without giving the king a target. The whole difference was in the game. The H3 pawn couldn't be protected. The F3 pawn much easier to protect with a bishop on C6. The H3 pawn impossible. So, all right, we are going to head out for the moment, but don't be fooled. Just because we're leaving for this very second here does not mean that we're really gone for good because as we bring up the schedule here, we have the rest of the Eastern Division. Yeah, three matchups here. The Hungry Hunters taking on the Armenia Eagles, the Croatia Bulldogs against the India Yogis, and the Turkey Knights and the Israel Counselors. It says 8:15 a.m. Pacific. That's already 7 minutes past. We're actually going to be starting in about 8 minutes, so don't go anywhere. We'll be covering that action in just a few, but until then, celebrate that Russia victory over China, and we will be right back.